Hello, my name is Lauren Wild, and I'm going to be teaching you the foundations of shamanism and shamanic witchcraft in our session today. So, I remember when I first came into understanding this world, the particular lens through which I came in was very shamanic. And what I mean by that is that it was very otherworldly. It came through my dreams. It came through my dance. It came through my singing. It came through my music making. And why that's important is because those are aspects that are very closely tied to shamanism. Now, for those of you that don't know, I came out of evangelical Christianity. And it's funny because I tell people all the time, I'm not that different as a shamanic witch and astrologer as I was as an evangelical Christian. They're very similar, right? So my favorite part of Christianity was corporate worship. It was the community, it was the body, it was prayer, it was praying for somebody to have breakthrough in some area of their life. But ultimately, it was corporate worship. And a lot of the people that end up leaving evangelical high control religions and finding their way over to shamanism and witchcraft and these more like ecstatic forms of spirituality, mysticism as a large body, are those that had those kinds of experiences in their church environment as well. And there's reason for that, because what happens, and especially in those big like revival type energies, or those big if you've ever gone to a big concert and you feel almost like you're one with like everybody that's at the concert, or you go to like a sporting event and you're all rooting for somebody and you feel like you're one with them, in a way that's like getting into a trance-like state. Okay. And it's important to understand there's not that much of a differentiation between like hedge witchery, which is a form of witchcraft, and shamanism. Very similar, in fact. So when it comes to shamanism, what we're really talking about is the cosmology of the shaman. So in the cosmology of the shaman, there is a multitude of realms that exist in. The more like kind of new age understanding would be like metaphysics or the quantum field, or the idea that there is this like infinite reality that's always existing, where that we exist in both the past, the present, and the future, and that there's a multitude of us existing at all times, right? Just like shamanism has believed that far before science and metaphysics tried to make sense of the great mystery, right? So shamanism is one of the most ancient forms of spirituality that was very, very, very tied to being very much like the priest, the priestess, and the healer of tribal communities. Now, tribal communities being all people basically before puritanical high control religions and colonization happened, right? If you go far enough back, your ancestors at some point were earth worshipers because they didn't know anything else. If you're familiar with spiral dynamics and the idea that consciousness is a spiral, we would call this the purple, right? Like the tribal consciousness, like the oneness consciousness. So in shamanism, there is not a past, present, and future. I mean, there is, but they're always coexisting in one. But what there is directions. There is the north, there's the east, there's the south, there's the west. Then there's the upper heavens, the middle world, Midgard, and the underworld. So the cosmology of the shaman is very large. It is not like 2D, 3D. It's very 5D. And what happens is this concept that we are able to leave our human existence and tap into our soul and travel. Now, what creates the differentiation between the witch and the shaman is that not all witches travel to other spaces. Not all witches try to get into trance to go and meet a guide or meet an ancestor or go back to a place or go into the future or try to merge with something. Not all witches are into that, right? Maybe high ceremony, but not really. With shamanism, however, one of the core pieces of shamanism is that we go and we travel out. we go beyond our own hedge, our homes, and we go meet the spirits where they are in their environment. The difference between that and what we call a hedge witch is that the hedge witch brings the spirits to them. Now, you may find as you progress through your practices that you're both, okay? Now, one of the other core pieces of the shaman is healing. So it is very much not just about, manifesting something. It is also about healing. And that is why the witch and the shaman can come really close to each other. Another archetype that falls within this category would be the midwife. So they're all like these liminal space holders, okay? And you won't really understand that there's so many different kinds of witchcraft until you dip your toes into lots of different kinds of witchcraft. But the more that I understand all of this cosmology, the more that I understand that shamanism is what I probably would be the strongest associated with at this point. But shamanism is deeply tied to consciousness. It is tied to the illumination and the waking up and the journey of the soul to go out and to come back in, to be initiated, to go to the underworld, to come back up, to go back down, to come back up. It's very, very much about journey work and path walking. And so not all forms of witchery or conscious-based healing practices have this. And so what you'll find is that a lot of people that have very shamanistic tendencies have the ability to lucid dream very easily, have the ability to be the witness to themselves very easily, have the ability to see, sense, and feel illnesses on people. So like it's hilarious because like when I was in the church, a lot of my gifts that I had were just shamanic. The other thing about shamanic is that it's called that in the way that it is like the set aside spiritual kind of mystical folk that are different in their community. So shaman also has a strong correlation with being relegated to being sent outside of the community in the hut, or like the medicine woman or the witch doctor, or like the witch, right? They kind of have this like wound attached to them, which says like, you're too strange for regular contemporary society. You're too unconventional. So we need you as part of our community to fix us when, conventional strategies don't work. But we also need you to stay on the outskirts of our community. So it has with it, this stigma kind of attached to it as well. Now, neo-shamanism is a very talked about thing, kind of like neo-paganism. I don't teach neo anything. That's not my vibe. I teach ancient things in the esoteric arts. So my goal is to always drop you in where you're going to be not appropriating colonizer, right? So here's what we have to understand. In my opinion, I think the greatest form of shamanism we can do is ancestral based, to figure out where our wells of magic and power lie within our ancestry. Now, does that mean that we have to go down the lineage line that is only our ancestry? No, but it is helpful to figure out, because when you start to get into a lot of ancestry work, you'll start to tap into the vibration of these different kinds of energies, and you'll realize ancestral energy is important and the energy of the land is important. And so getting a sense of where your ancestors built the pockets of energy, the ley lines of energy, is important, because you may have to go on a journey there to reclaim some sort of important like activation energy. It's very tied to like the shamanic quest, right? The journey. But also we activate these deep wells of stored magic stored in our bodies and ourselves. And when we journey, particularly to meet our ancestors, we can bring our well-line ancestors back with us, and they will support us and they will help us, especially the well-line ones. I created a whole program on this called Ancestral Witch. I'm in the process of renaming it The Threshold right now. But it is very, very deeply tied to going down all of your lines to connect with your well-line ancestors and then bring them back to support you here in the present. But here's the thing that shamanistic people need is ground. We need to know what is our north, what is our east, what is our south, and what is our west, what is up and what is down, and what is neutral. All shamanic practitioners have to understand their system. They have to understand their giftings. They have to understand when they're ungrounded, when they're not ungrounded, when they're rooted, when they're not unrooted. Because if not, these gifts can very quickly feel like a curse. It can feel like you're constantly disembodied. It can feel like you're constantly dissociating, when really you might be a very sensitive shamanic practitioner that is being pulled in a certain direction or a certain place that needs your awareness and your activation energy. Okay. Now, one thing that is important to understand is that, especially in things like neo-shamanism and the world that we live in today, is that the other thing about going down your line is it helps us not appropriate other people's cultures. Now, there's always a shaman in every culture. Okay, there's a shaman in every culture. When I came into this world out of Christianity, I went yoga and then Native American shamanism. Like, that's just the natural thing that pulled me, because that's the only thing I knew, and that's the only thing my guides could reference for me. And so I started to get into Native American shamanism and the medicine wheel. And then slowly but surely from that, started to get pulled in a more ancestral direction. So I spent a lot of time researching Welsh shamanism, which is very strongly guided by the Green Lady for me, also known as Ellen of the Ways. And then most recently, over the last 2 years, I've gotten very, very, very rooted in Seder, which is Norse shamanism. It was created by Freya, and between Ellen of the Ways and Freya, that like very strongly makes up the shamanic cosmology for me. It doesn't mean that I don't appreciate other people's cultures. As a matter of fact, I appreciate them so much, and I honor them so much, that I try to come at it from a perspective that is closer to my own native history. And I want to learn, I want to understand. And if and when I feel like I get summoned into any type of, traditional curandera, or any type of that traditional shamanic initiation, I will absolutely take it. Like, I will go. But as of now, so far, the only thing I felt very activated in and drawn towards is particularly Welsh and Norse shamanism. So those are the ones that I keep going down. I just keep going down them, and I'm very drawn to them. Now, there was a period of time that I also got very interested in Chinese shamanism. My husband is a master of medical Qigong, and there's also Chinese shamanism. It's called like the Wuji. I can't remember what they're named, but there was also shamanic Chinese practitioners. So like, they're everywhere. Okay. Oftentimes the shamanic practitioner and the witch get overlaid, just like the midwife gets called the witch, right? So it's like, they have these like sectionalities where they can kind of bump into each other. But regardless, usually they're kind of like the town's spiritual person that is strange and capable of like reading signs that nobody else can see, that get the downloads, they get the prophetic visions, and then they address the community as such, right? So they're very much like the spiritual leader of their community. Okay. Again, the thing that makes it slightly different from the witch is that not all shamans cast spells. Not all shamans are necessarily interested in any type of political, work, or any type of activism beyond their own community, right? And so, it takes us into kind of like naming some of the different archetypes. Whereas like a shaman might not be super interested in sovereignty. As a matter of fact, shamanism, like they might be super interested in oneness, like oneness consciousness, versus like there being this strong sense of like you and me. And so again, it's a large body of work. The other thing is that if you feel uncomfortable with the term shaman, you can always say shamanic practitioner. Right. So like, that is what a lot of people will say. That's typically what I say. I mean, I know that I'm a shamaness. Like, the more that I uncover my own gifts, the more that I do this work, the more I'm like, okay, this is like the thing. Like, this is where I think my craft will really get honed and take on new life, in the next 5 years. Right now, I'm still very interested in this strong manifestation type energy. And I'm okay with like kind of weaving back and forth between the two. Again, another word for that would be called a hedge witch. Okay. And so the other thing that's important is that shamans, their tools are very important to them. Traditionally, it is a rattle and a drum, and then some sort of cloak that goes over the eyes that allows for the practitioner to see slightly different. Okay. Other things would be like smoke clearing tools, things like sage and cedar, and then the elements, water, flower petals, herbs, plants, very closely tied to nature, to the seasons, and to animals. Okay. Also closely tied to things like ley lines, which are the energetic meridians of the earth that have acupressure activation points. Okay. Part of the shaman is the journey, but not all shamans journey out of their villages. So that is important to think about as well. We always get the ability to go on journey as within and so without, and that is to journey to meet our guides and our ancestors and our support team, our spiritual support team. Okay. So when we start to really get into shamanic work, if you feel that, you might feel like you definitely need some tools. Here are some of them. To have a drum, to have a rattle, to have an athame or some sort of ceremonial blade, to have a scarf or something that goes over your head. Okay. Now that's just the baseline. Now some shamans, they will use different plant medicines, whether that's ayahuasca, combo, tobacco. Like there's quite a large arrangement of different kinds of plant species and plant allies. I tend to do trance, right? Like that's what I tend to take people into is trance through repetition of singing, drumming, chanting, and movement. And then I have taken people on journeys before. You get what I'm saying? But really and truly, most of it is by entering trance-like states through repetitive movement, singing, drumming, and like just breathing, like getting ourselves into these trance-like states together through breath and through repetition. Okay. So hopefully that is helpful for you in understanding some of the different tools. The other thing is a lot of shamanic practitioners work with some sort of divination method, whether that was runes, oghams, bones, is very like elemental, could be reading water, could be reading patterns in the sky, different animals, different animal tracks. That's very tied to like shamanism, okay? Shamanistic practices. Tarot is closely tied to the occult. So there's like a difference between like using tarot cards and oracle cards versus like reading the elements. Reading the elements is much closer tied to shamanic practitioner work, and having these unique tools like oracle cards and tarot cards, pendulums, things like that. That's more tied to the esoteric arts and traditional witchcraft. Okay. So at the end of the day, noticing if any of this stands out for you, the most important thing to remember about shamanism is its cosmology. It strongly believes that there is an upper world, there's the middle world, and there's the lower world. And all around us, there are different realms. They are unseen, and that we can travel to them and that others can travel back with us, right? And so that at the end of the day, that is what shamanism is really rooted on, is the journey and the quest to gain information from another realm and bring it back for healing. Okay. All right. I hope this was helpful for you, and I'll see you in our next class.